Have you ever held something so small that it carried the power to destroy your entire life? A folded piece of paper, faded ink, just a letter. But inside those words, hidden between each trembling line, was a truth so heavy, so impossible to face, it almost ended everything. She never imagined that a single moment, a single revelation, could shatter her reality and then rebuild it from ashes. What she discovered after reading that letter didn't just change her life. It changed what she believed about time, love, and the universe itself. You're about to witness a story most people would never have the courage to tell. A story that reminds us how close pain and purpose can live together inside one human heart. Because sometimes the deepest wounds are not carved by others. They're written by our own choices. And sometimes, those same choices open the door to something divine. It started on an ordinary morning, the kind we all take for granted. The world outside was calm, the coffee still warm, sunlight leaking through half-closed blinds. She had no idea that today would be the day her past would come looking for her. A letter sealed decades ago waited inside a dusty box, forgotten, but not gone. When her fingers brushed the paper, the air shifted, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. What happens next will leave you breathless. Because this isn't just a story about pain, it's about revelation. About the moment when a human being meets truth face to face and has to decide whether to run from it or be reborn through it. As you watch, I want you to listen not just with your mind, but with your energy, because what's coming next carries a vibration, a frequency that could speak directly to something sleeping inside you. Maybe you've carried your own version of this letter, a memory you never opened, a regret you keep buried deep, a promise you broke to yourself. We all do. But what if the key to healing isn't in forgetting, it's in finally looking? What if the universe keeps sending us the same message, again and again, until we're ready to read it? That's not coincidence. That's quantum alignment, the point where emotion, energy, and destiny collide. She sat there, the envelope trembling in her hands, her heart pounding like thunder under her ribs. Fear, guilt, confusion, all mixing into one unbearable storm. The letter called her name like a whisper from another dimension, begging to be opened. And when she finally unfolded it, reality shifted. Her pulse slowed, time stretched, and then came the first words. Simple, human, devastating. From that moment, the air around her changed. Every sound, every flicker of light seemed alive, aware. The words began to pull her somewhere else, somewhere beyond logic or memory. And even though she didn't know it yet, this was the exact second her life divided into before and after. Stay with me until the end, because you're not just watching someone else's story. You're about to feel your own reflected back to you. And before this video is over, you'll understand that no pain is wasted, and no truth stays hidden forever. If you've ever held on to a secret, a letter, or a piece of your past that still speaks to you, comment, "I heard it," right now. Join this community of people who don't just watch stories, they live them. Subscribe and become part of something bigger, a channel that reveals the invisible and transforms lives through truth, emotion, and the hidden science of the soul. And remember, this is only the beginning of what she discovered. She stared at the first line of the letter like it had just spoken her name. The handwriting was shaky, like it had been written in a moment of panic, or maybe regret. For a second, she didn't breathe. Her fingers trembled, and then she read the rest. It was a confession. Not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, devastating. The kind of truth that doesn't scream, it whispers. A truth that had been sealed away for decades, buried beneath silence, buried beneath shame. Her father, the man she had spent her entire life believing had simply walked out one day and never looked back, hadn't left by choice. He had written this letter knowing he wouldn't be around to explain it. And that letter had sat in the dark for over 20 years. A hidden letter. A message no one ever intended her to find. Until now. Every word was like a knife. It spoke of a love he never stopped feeling. A love he couldn't protect. Of mistakes that led him down a path that couldn't be undone. He wrote about her mother. The fights, the betrayals, the things she never knew were happening behind closed doors. Things no child ever should. And in the middle of that mess, he made a choice. A choice that haunted him until his final breath. He had promised to come back. He had promised her he would never disappear. But life, as it often does, had different plans. She folded the letter, slowly, carefully, as if it might fall apart in her hands. Her heart felt like it had been split open, but not in anger, not in hate, in something far more complicated: understanding. She had spent years resenting a ghost, building a wall around her heart to keep the pain out. But now the pain had a name. It had context. It had truth. This wasn't just an emotional story. It was a life-changing discovery. Because suddenly all the noise in her head, the echo of abandonment, the silence of unanswered questions, was replaced by something else. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. The kind of clarity that stings before it heals. The kind that makes you want to cry and scream and collapse all at once. For years, she had believed she wasn't enough, that something inside her must have driven him away, that maybe she wasn't lovable. But the truth was never about her. It was never her fault. And reading those words, holding that hidden letter in her hands, she felt something shift in her chest, as if part of her had been waiting for this moment her entire life. But here's the thing. That letter didn't just break her. It opened her. It broke the version of herself that had learned to survive through silence and guilt. And in that brokenness, something sacred entered, a kind of awareness she couldn't quite name, but it was real. As if the universe had been waiting for the exact moment she would be ready to receive the truth, the moment she would finally be able to understand what it meant, and what to do with it. And as the tears streamed down her face, she realized something else, something she never expected, that this wasn't the end of the story. No, this was the beginning of something else entirely, a moment that would take everything she thought she knew and flip it upside down. Because what came next wasn't just healing, it was transformation. And now that door had been opened, it could never be closed again. That night felt like a storm without thunder. She didn't speak. She barely moved. The letter sat open beside her, like a wound on paper that refused to close. The words kept echoing in her mind, louder than any voice around her. Her body was still, but inside, it was chaos. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt, like it wanted out of her chest. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from something deeper. Like her soul itself didn't know what to do. She whispered to herself, "Why now?" And, "Why me?" But no answer came. The only sound in the room was the low hum of her ceiling fan and the broken rhythm of her breathing. Her thoughts spiraled into guilt, into shame, into that dangerous space between reality and collapse. And then, a single thought rose to the top like a scream in a silent room. "I can't do this anymore." That was the moment she slipped into the darkest part of herself. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff and watching the wind dare you to jump. The weight of years lost, of truths buried, of silence that screamed louder than words. It all came crashing down. She wasn't thinking of tomorrow. Tomorrow didn't feel real. All she felt was the suffocating pressure of now, of the letter, of a life built on unanswered questions and stories no one told her. Everything she ever believed about her past began to crumble. Her identity, her memories, even her idea of love, what was real, what had been a lie. And if her own blood could leave behind such a cruel silence, what did that say about her? She walked to the bathroom mirror, stared at her reflection, and barely recognized the woman looking back. Red eyes, pale skin, lost. She touched her face like she was trying to wake herself up, but she was already awake, too awake, and that made it worse. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, cold tile against her skin. She pulled her legs close and began to cry, not the kind of crying you can hide, the kind that comes from your gut, that primal grief that feels like dying without death. For a moment, everything went still. The world paused, and in that silence, the thought returned. Would anyone even notice if I disappeared? That's how far she had fallen. That's how close she came to the edge. Not just emotionally, but physically, spiritually. The kind of fall you don't talk about at dinner tables. The kind you bury beneath makeup and fake smiles and empty "I'm fines." This wasn't just emotional pain. This was existential. A crisis of meaning. A collision between her past and her future, with no clear path forward. She felt like she had reached the end of her story. Like her soul had been cracked open and nothing would ever fit back the same way again. But there, at rock bottom, something unexpected flickered inside her. Barely visible like a dying ember, but it was there, and even in that darkness, something was whispering to her, "Not yet." Have you ever felt like you were standing at the very end of your road? Like life had pressed pause and you weren't sure if it would ever hit play again? If you've ever been there, or you're there right now. Comment yes or no below, because what happens next is not just survival. It's something much bigger. She sat there for what felt like hours, her back against the cold bathroom wall, the air heavy with silence. But it wasn't the same silence that had once suffocated her. This one felt different, still painful, yes. But inside that pain, something had shifted. There was a strange stillness now, as if the universe itself had stopped holding its breath and started whispering. Her eyes, though swollen, lifted slightly. Her breathing slowed. And in that fragile pause, a single thought took form. What if this wasn't the end? What if this was the beginning? She crawled across the floor, trembling, and picked up the letter again. But this time, it wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. She didn't just read the words. She saw herself in them. All the fear, all the guilt, all the stories she had told herself for decades began to dissolve. What she had thought was abandonment was protection. What she believed was betrayal was sacrifice. Her father hadn't left to hurt her. He had left to spare her from something darker. And for the first time, she let that truth reach her heart. This wasn't just an emotional story anymore. This was a transformation story. Every sentence in that letter now read like a key, unlocking doors in her soul she didn't even know were closed. She had been living with chains made of silence, guilt, and unanswered questions. But this letter, this message from beyond time, began breaking every link. What she held wasn't just ink on paper. It was a sacred transmission, a call to rise, a moment designed by something greater than coincidence. It was redemption disguised as pain. She got up, not like before, tired, heavy, defeated. This time she stood like someone reborn. She looked in the mirror again, but now her reflection stared back with different eyes. There was clarity there, strength, not the absence of pain, but the presence of something deeper, something divine. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a victim of her story. She felt like the author of a new version of herself. Hope, that ancient ember buried beneath years of sorrow, had sparked again. Small, fragile, but undeniably alive. And with it came something she hadn't felt in a long time. Faith in God. Not the distant God she prayed to as a child, but a God who had always been there, even in her silence, even in her collapse. A God who knew she would find this letter at exactly the right moment. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you." Not just to the universe, not just to her father, but to herself, for surviving, for not giving up, for daring to see pain as a doorway, not a death sentence. And maybe you're watching this right now because you needed this moment too. Maybe your own breakthrough is waiting on the other side of something you haven't faced yet. Maybe your pain holds the exact key you've been searching for. Because the truth is, sometimes the very thing that breaks us is the thing that sets us free. And if that's true, if she could rise from her ashes, you can too, because you're not alone. You never were. And what comes next is even more powerful. She walked out of that bathroom not as the same woman who had entered it hours before. The version of herself who had carried so much pain, who believed she wasn't enough, who thought that silence meant abandonment, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, not someone without wounds, but someone who finally understood that her wounds were never signs of weakness. They were proof that she had survived. And now, with the letter folded tightly in her hand, she stepped into her living room, the same room where she had spent years avoiding herself. The same space that had once felt hollow, now felt different, warmer, like she had reclaimed it, reclaimed her story, because something had changed, something sacred, something irreversible. She didn't rush to tell anyone. Some transformations are too personal to announce. But inside, she knew. This was her turning point. That hidden letter hadn't just revealed a painful past. It had whispered a new beginning, a divine invitation to stop running, to stop hiding, to stop shrinking herself to fit a version of the world that was never meant for her. That's when she realized the truth hadn't destroyed her. It had freed her. And maybe that's exactly what you needed to hear right now. That the pain you carry doesn't have to define you. That the silence you've lived in isn't your destiny. That whatever story you've told yourself, "I'm not worthy, I'm too broken, I can't change," isn't the final chapter. Because the truth is, you have the power to start over. And the first step is believing that your story matters, that it's not too late, that even in your darkest night, there's a light waiting to be seen. You've just witnessed what happens when someone stops running from their past and turns to face it. And in doing so, they discover something most people never do. That healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering who you really are underneath the pain. And the most beautiful part? You don't have to do this alone. Here, in this space, in this community, we walk together. We tell the stories no one else dares to tell. We expose the invisible, and we transform pain into power. So if this video touched you, if it lit even the smallest spark inside your chest, I want you to do something right now. Don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment below. Let this be the moment you say, I'm ready, or type, I see myself in this, or even just, thank you. Because sometimes the act of speaking truth out loud is what finally sets us free. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next, because the next story we're about to share will take you even deeper. It's called The Voice She Ignored Until It Saved Her Life. And it's not just a story, it's a wake-up call. So turn on that notification bell, hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and most importantly, share this video with someone who needs it. Because what we're building here is bigger than content. It's a movement, it's a mission, it's transformation in motion. If you're still here, it means something inside you is shifting. That's no accident. Type yes below if you're ready to step into a new version of you. And if you're not ready to say it yet, come back when you are. Because the truth, we're just getting started.